Now it's time to address this video. I won't even bother trying to pronounce that name.
Recently, I've seen a few videos about whether the Helldivers could survive against aliens from other games. As a fan of this format, one thing I haven't seen is a video covering one of my favorite alien factions, the Covenant from Halo. Now, for those of you that don't know the Halo lore, the Covenant is an alliance of several alien species united under a fanatical theocracy that's bent on destroying humanity because their existence invalidates the Covenant's whole religion. And if you ask me, that fits in perfectly with what Liberty's finest are already fighting on a daily basis. In addition to having a military to match that of Super Earths, it's made up of a bunch of different races that all serve their own role. Need an endless supply of cannon fodder? Take a look at the grunts. What about your commanders and specialized infantry? Here are the elites. Bullet sponges with anti-armor capabilities? Hunters. You want space gorillas? We'll get into the details in just a minute, but remember that numbers and comparisons are very hard to come by, and whatever I say has nearly zero backing by logic or reason.
Well, at least he admits it.
And my words are worth less than requisition ships after playing Helldivers 2 for more than 30 minutes. I'll do my best not to make my favoritism too obvious, but I do think that Halo is one of the best pieces of media ever, and I will die on that hill. That's also why I want to hear your thoughts. By all means, point out something you think I got wrong. What makes this scenario so interesting is how its outcome can be debated and speculated on. To begin, we should take a strategic view of what a Covenant invasion might look like. We're never given exact numbers, but it seems that at the height of their strength, the Covenant had several hundred fleets with about 100 ships per fleet, so total numbers could range from tens to hundreds of thousands of ships.
I genuinely did a double take when I heard him say this. Like all too many of these types of YouTubers, they just say things off the riff with no actual evidence. No, they did not have several hundred fleets with 100 ships per fleet. In fact, before Halo Oblivion was released, the biggest ship fleets we ever saw were those under the Unyielding Hierophant, which was 500 ships, and the Force under High Chariot Delta Halo, which was somewhere above 500, or the pre-retcon Battle of Reach, around 314 ships. Beyond that, fleets in the Human Covenant War were actually rather small. You had a 200 ship fleet dispatched to take down Cole, followed by an extra 100 as reinforcements. But that was Cole, the undefeated thorn in the Covenant's side for over a decade, and his response was less than 200 ships, the biggest UNSC fleet in history. Cole's loss was such a loss to morale that it caused the UNSC to go public with the Spartan 2 program as a result. If you actually read the original novels, pay attention to the games, Covenant fleets are rather small actually, perhaps a few dozen at most, typically ranging in the double-digit area. Some are even less than that in size. It makes sense somewhat when you realize Halo Reach established that the UNSC only ever had around 2,000 ships, but then Halo Oblivion comes along and turns everything on its head, to the detriment of any hope for a cohesive story or consistent world building. Saying that the Covenant invasion fleet was double the sum total of UNSC ships in human space, the 100 assault carriers within the fleet were roughly equivalent to 400 of the biggest UNSC ships that modern Halo lore says they have during the war. And if we go for the second biggest UNSC ships, then those 100 assault carriers would weigh in mass equivalent to over 6,000 Spirits of Fire, and that fleet had 20 ships that were even bigger. We learned that the biggest fleet regret, or a Covenant admiral with a century of experience had ever seen, was only around 4,000 or so ships, split into groups of 20, possibly including the High Chariot Defense Fleet, for a total of 5,200 ships. It's even backed up by an in-universe historian as the Covenant's full might. It's more than double the UNSC's own fleet numbers, and only a few years later, we have Regret, who was witness to this fleet, scrambling for a faster and better way to make ships.
But sire, you have me skulk in ancient ruins and search empty temples. How does this help me accomplish my goal?
The war with the humans will require a great deal many more machines than we can currently muster.
I will take what we have.
And leave us defenseless? No. The ancients will provide for us. This world shall be the birthplace for an invasion fleet beyond imagining. Enough to crush the humans quickly and with ease.
That's the entire plot of Halo Wars. We will not see fleets like these, divided into 20 groups of 200, for the rest of the war until the very end, and in specific situations of the most vital need. The 343 era introduces a significant amount of copium, saying things like the Halo Wars destroyers are actually largely on the frontiers, exploring for who knows what. Considering it took the Covenant 27 years to find Earth, they're not very good at their jobs, but we see a significant number of them in media like the comics, and Halo lore states that each one is supposedly a fleet killer by themselves. Sure thing. Either way, it's not hundreds of thousands of ships. Not even close. We could double the number from Halo Oblivion and say that half of their fleet was kept in reserve, and we'd only just hit over 10,000. That's exceedingly generous in and of itself. In my Galaxy on Fire series, I attempted to stretch things as far as they possibly could go, and the best possible source on the matter couldn't get me past 100,000 ships. Meanwhile, the Helldivers have 30,000 ships invading one sector of space right at this very moment. At an all-time player peak, they had 458,000 ships of just the super destroyer variety fighting simultaneously across the galaxy map, equivalent to 114 times as many ships as the Covenant's largest offensive build-up in its entire history, or 225 times the UNSC's entire navy.
It's worth noting that only a few thousand ships ever took part in the Human Covenant War, since the rest were dedicated to defending the Covenant's territory.
No source I have ever seen says this, and this is just an attempt at revisionist Halo. As a matter of fact, the last days of the war cost the Covenant most, if not all of their ships that they had remaining. Not exactly up to their gills in reserves, are they? Sure, they'll have some, but why would most be held back? To defend against whom, exactly? Why did the Covenant need to lie about ship losses if they were up to their balls in tonnage? Sure, the schism had an effect, with the Prophets effectively in a position to order 66 the elites, which was a plan they botched tremendously, by the way. Do you really think they lost 99% of their forces in the last month of the war? Nothing anywhere remotely agrees with that, unless it comes from newer 343 retcons that I haven't seen, because I have looked.
As for the number of soldiers the Covenant might have, that number is even more obscure, but it's safe to assume that they had tens if not hundreds of billions across their whole empire, which makes for a large pool of manpower. Alien power?
Old sources say billions, with trillions of useless Let-Golo eels. Newer sources say the drones had trillions when the Covenant arrived, but who knows if the Covenant kept them at all? And considering the Grunt Rebellion and its history, I think it's unlikely. Nonetheless, if we assume they did keep them, you could technically argue for trillions of grunts, if you merge sources with the Halo Reach Prima guide. Good luck feeding them all, or making sure they can breathe. The newest sources actually say that the Covenant military is around 10 million troops at most. Population-wise, there's millions of jackals and hunters, and some order of billions for elites.
Looking at Super Earth, they have even less to go off of, so we'll just look at in-game numbers. Helldivers 2 had 500,000 concurrent players at its peak, and sold over 8 million copies total, and with each player getting their own ship, and each of those ships holding about 50 frozen Helldivers in reserve at any moment, that gives us anywhere from 25 million to 400 million Helldivers.
I don't know why none of these guys are able to just look at the galactic map and see the big numbers, which say clear as day that over 2 billion Helldivers have died. It's hard to miss. In the current numbers, it's actually over 6 billion Helldivers. To put this in Human Covenant war terms, that would be like if 1 in every 4 dead from the entire war was a Helldiver. Not a civilian, a child, or a bog-standard soldier. A Helldiver. We don't know the total numbers for the UNSC military personnel, but it isn't going to be anywhere near the full 20 plus billion number here, and likely far less. For example, with an assumption of 100 million servicemen in the UNSC, you would need over 5,000 UNSC Infinities in order to move them across the stars. The Infinity, as a post-war ship, has the largest stated crew count for any UNSC ship that I have seen. If every single one of the UNSC's 2,035 ships was an Infinity, the Navy would only be able to move around 35 million men through space at any one time. If the UNSC did have this many soldiers or more, the rest would have to be restricted to the planets they live on. This would be a little over 2% of Super Earth's Helldiver mobile infantry. Logistics-wise, the difference between the UNSC and Super Earth is like night and day. For the Helldivers, we have some interesting numbers to play with. We know of 2 billion dead Helldivers or so back then, and 6 billion total today, or thereabouts. But if we look at the first facts we were given in our tutorial mission, those who become Helldivers are merely those who survived training. 21.3%. The rest died, which is better than it used to be, but this means that with the 2 to 6 billion we see dead on the map, a further 7 billion when this video was first released, to 22 billion today, had also died, not against Terminids, automatons, or Illuminate, but they died simply in their failure to qualify at training. And the average age is 18, which says a lot about the total population for Super Earth. If this is what they can afford to lose from people who are on average of the same generation. To put this in Halo terms, with the losses to date, this would be like sacrificing the entirety of your population to the Spartan program to come away at the end with nothing. And while Helldivers aren't physically Spartans, they have more military-aged men and women approaching the pinnacle of their special forces ranks than the UNSC has people that died in the 27 years of war. To say this would be a step up in challenge for the Covenant would be an understatement. A victorious war against Super Earth would necessitate the Covenant probably killing no less than 10 times the UNSC's population in a Human Covenant war.
And that's not even counting the rest of Super Earth's military. So, despite the Covenant's clear advantage on the ground, Super Earth's ship count proves that they could destroy the Covenant's navy before their forces could even make landfall, right? Not so fast. This is the part where my bias comes in. The Covenant has a few things over Super Earth's navy. For one, a super destroyer is about 170 meters long, while one of the most common Covenant battlecruisers is 1.7 kilometers long. Another huge Covey advantage is energy shielding. In Halo, the main reason Covenant ships were so formidable was because humanity had no way to get around their energy shields. Not even their nukes were effective.
Quite literally not true.
There was something there, however, that was too small to see on the view screen. The nuke. Keyes had launched that missile in the opposite direction, but its reverse thrust had not completely overcome their tremendous forward velocity. As the Iroquois had screamed over the prow of the destroyer, and as they orbited Sigma Octanus IV, the nuke had drifted closer to the frigates, who had fixed their attention solidly on the Iroquois. Commander Keyes tapped his datapad and sent the signal to detonate the bomb. There was a flash of white, a crackle of lightning, and the alien ships vanished as a cloud of destruction enveloped them. Waves of the EMP interacted with the magnetic field of Sigma Octanus IV, rippled with Rainbow Borealis. The cloud of vapor expanded and cooled, and faded to yellow, orange, red, then black dust that scattered into space. Both Covenant frigates, however, were still intact. Their shields, however, flickered once, then went dead. The Covenant ship slowly turned toward the Pillar of Autumn, and its turret tracked their position. For the first time in his life, Keyes prayed that a Covenant ship's shields would hold. The alien ship became a flash of white light, its outline blurred. Their shields held for a split second as the Shiva warhead detonated inside its protective aura. The shockwave rebounded off the asymmetrical shape of the shields just before their collapse. Jets of energy exploded outward at 3 different angles. Thunder and plasma roiled into space, cleanly missing the Pillar of Autumn. The light faded, and the Covenant flagship was gone. "What's in it?" 6 Anaconda surface-to-air missiles. Will's voice barely concealed his glee. "And a pair of Fury tac nukes." Fred gave a low whistle. The Fury tac nuke was the closest thing the UNSC had in its arsenal to a nuclear grenade. It was the size and shape of an overinflated football. It delivered slightly less than a megaton yield and was extremely clean. Unfortunately, it was also completely useless to them in this situation. Kelly hurled the nuke straight up into the gullet of the cruiser. The sky turned white. Fred's faceplate polarized to its darkest setting. Thunder rolled through his body. Fire and molten metal blossomed over the ridge, boiled skyward, and rained back into the valley. The granite top of the intervening mountains shattered into dust, and the snow on their side melted in muddy rivulets. It was a sea of flame. Hundreds of fires dotted the cracked, glassy ground. Where the Bighorn River had snaked along, there was now only a long, steaming furrow. There was no trace of the cruiser or the Covenant troops that had filled the valley moments ago. All that remained was a field of smoldering, twisted bone and metal.
He took a moment to compose himself before he opened the hatch. In the last 15 minutes, the dusk had seeded the space on the dark side of the moon of Onyx with 14 nuclear mines, 30 megaton yield, with vacuum-enhanced loads. Delicate work to stay stealthed and get them all deployed on Admiral Patterson's timetable, but they'd done it. The two Covenant destroyers snapped on center screen. Scattered Archer missiles detonated harmlessly on their shields. The ships turned out of orbital alignments to face their enemy, and in doing so, closed ranks. 3 white spheres popped behind the vessels, expanded and enveloped the now clustered enemy destroyers. Jets of supercharged ions funneled downward into the planet's magnetosphere. Perfect placement of the nukes, Yang murmured, glancing between the viewscreen and his instruments. Maximum destruction and radiation trapped by the planet so the fleet can move in and finish them off. Waters rubbed his hands together in unconscious anticipation. The fireballs cooled to red, and a single sleek silhouette emerged. One of the Covenant destroyers had survived. A UNSC destroyer, Iwo Jima, grazed a Covenant carrier 3 times its size, deflected off its shields, and careened into 2 other Covenant destroyers. The UNSC vessel erupted from inside. Reactor overload and single nuclear warhead detonated in an act of self-destruction. The fireball enveloped 8 nearby enemy ships, of which 6 survived behind their shimmering energy shields. The Covenant fleet was in disarray, slowed and paused to regroup. "All sensors on target," Waters replied. Rainbows played over the central view screen, building composite images from radiation far infrared to soft gamma, and 14 Covenant ships resolved. Clustered together in a spherical formation 300,000 kilometers distant, that Covenant fleet was about to find out why UNSC battle groups always had a prowler assigned to their ranks. They were the sneak thieves and spies of the UNSC fleet, capable of behind-enemy lines recon, rescue missions, and, under the right conditions, the pinpoint placement of a nuclear minefield. "Proximal enemy group now in the center of Alpha Field," Deruno announced. Her hands shook. "Distal group crossing the terminal line of Beta Field." "Remove safety interlocks," Lash said. Yang nodded and typed in the code words that made the 16 nukes hot. The red Inferno button on Lash's command console lit. He set his thumb next to it, and it beeped, verifying his biometric signature. He then flipped up the clear protective cover, inserted the master key in the adjacent slot, and turned it. "Proximal group approaching terminal plane," Deruno said. "Beta group of ships now centered in distal field." "Here goes nothing," Lash whispered. "Here goes everything." He pressed the button, and it made a satisfying click. On either side of the moon, 7 tiny suns flashed into existence, ballooned, and enveloped the Covenant battle groups. The collective nuclear fireballs cooled to yellow and then dull red. Even with vacuum-enhanced loads, nuclear warheads in space did not persist a fraction as long as aerial or ground bursts. The destructive clouds thinned to translucency, and a glittering haze of cooling metal formed an expanding halo around the planetoid. Inside this silver confetti, however, larger shimmering patches resolved, the energy shields of 4 surviving Covenant destroyers.
In fact, we have 50 megaton nukes consistently shown to be a viable method to take down Covenant shields, with the chance of damaging the vessel underneath as well. The Nyland-era novels show us what is eventually revealed to be a Ket pattern ship, the most common Covenant vessel, getting its shields kicked in by a 60 kiloton Mac round. By comparison, in the movie, it's actually far weaker than that. Look at its speed. Nukes in space, as I understand it, are actually less effective than in atmosphere. But here's what is pertinent. While we don't know a whole lot about super-Earth destroyers, like if they even have shields, which they should, frankly, we do know the armament, as I mentioned in my last video.
"It's just you, the gun in your hands, and 2,000 megatons of explosives in close orbit."
2 gigatons in total ordnance is nothing to scoff at. That's equivalent to every super-destroyer having 40 Havoc nukes. With 500,000 or so super-destroyers at any one time, that's 20 million nukes. About 2,000 per Covenant ship if we assume there's 10,000 ships. If we go with my inflated example, it's still over 200 each. 200 megatons to 1,000 gigatons dedicated to destroying each Covenant ship. If you remember the legendary Supermax calculation from Halo Fall of Reach, that's double the Supermax yield on the more reasonable end. Now obviously, while it's nice to have that level of power, you have to be able to hit your target, and we don't actually know anything about ship-to-ship combat or range, other than the fact Helldiver ships can fire from low Earth orbit, which is around 200 kilometers, but is also through an atmosphere. Covenant ships have feats in the thousands or tens of thousands of kilometers, but I would not argue Super-Earth's superiority based on their ability to outgun Covenant ships in a straight-up fight. In fact, I think if you look at some of the better showings for Covenant ships, the power generation to even move the bigger vessels, for example, then a conventional shoot-'em-up is probably not going to go in the Helldiver's favour until Arrowhead bothered to give us any real world building. We will get to ship comparisons later. Those 2 gigatons apiece would actually be better served nuking the surfaces of planets the Covenant find themselves on to destroy population, military, or industrial locations.
The only weapons super destroyers have that might break through energy shields is the ship's Atlas cannon, which provides the orbital strike stratagems. But until the shields are down, all the other weapons on board would be pretty much useless. It's worth noting that Super Earth fields a Liberty-class cruiser that's larger and more heavily armed than super destroyers, but their quantity is, we don't know. During the Human Covenant War in the Halo universe, the UNSC managed to destroy 1 Covenant ship for every 3 of their own, and that was on a good day. With plasma-based beams, torpedoes, and turrets, and each battlecruiser containing dozens of space fighters and boarding craft, combined with the smaller size and firepower of super destroyers, we can assume that it would take about a dozen Super Earth ships to take down a typical Covenant ship.
He is just saying words. In less than 2 years of war, the Helldivers alone have killed over 281 billion foes across the galaxy. That would be like murdering each and every person on High Charity 40 times over. In terms of Covenant population stats, this would be like completely wiping out every single named Covenant world, and plus the entirety of the Jackals, Brutes, Prophets, Engineers, and maybe even the Elites, with room for more.
So unless Super Earth could mobilize pretty much every ship at their disposal, they'd be in big trouble for most space battles.
They literally can.
Alert! Alert! Initiating FTL jump to Super Earth. FTL jump successful.
The crew was forced to initiate an emergency warp without your authorization in order to protect Super Earth's investment in this vessel.
One big advantage the Helldivers have, though recent info seems to suggest it's not as spectacular as we once thought, is that super destroyers can move to any system with an FTL line almost instantly. And when you measure out the distances and the time, it's around 1 billion times faster than light. Covenant ships are at best 1.4 million times faster than the speed of light.
The planet-side conflicts would be much more interesting. I'd be remiss not to refer to the Illuminate when speculating on how Helldivers would do against the Covenant, as the Illuminate frequently utilized energy shields and other similar tech to that of the Covenant. I personally can't speak on how it was to fight the Illuminate, but apparently it was pretty bad. The Covenant likes to avoid ground engagements, preferring to glass planets entirely, but for the sake of our scenario, let's say the Covenant avoids glassing for strategic purposes? Seriously, who wants to control this planet during a galactic war? It rains flaming rocks like every 5 minutes. Usually, Helldivers enjoy complete air and space superiority and can call down stratagems at will. But I think the Covenant will challenge this standard even more than automatons do with their jammers and anti-air weapons. The the Helldivers, would still be able to deploy since they use Hellpods, but they'd likely experience some casualties on the way down.
He is just saying words.
The same goes for their resupply and support weapon Hellpods, with not everything making it down to our glorious freedom fighters. Covenant AA assets would also target Eagle bombers and Pelican shuttles.
Tower 1 approach has active AAA. Mayday! I can't control it! Pelican down! Pelican down!
Brace yourselves, we're going in a little hot!
Commander, this is Kilo 2-3. Lost my wingman and our only hog. Over.
Roger that, Focus. Get out of there.
Now it's time to talk about the types of Covenant troops Helldivers would likely face on the ground. We'll start at the bottom with the Grunts. Since they canonically breed at uncontrollable levels, they make perfect cannon fodder for the Covenant.
Grunts only pose a real threat if we assume there's trillions of them, which is frankly nonsensical. And even if we did, if we assumed that the Covenant could enact discipline on such a scale, arm, armor, feed, and respirate so many men, there's still the small issue of getting them all in ships to where they need to be. It would probably take thousands of CSO-class ships to do so. In terms of numbers, not only do Helldivers have the bullets to never run out, like was the original doctrine for Grunts in the first Halo novel, but the Helldivers can effectively wipe the map clean with all manner of automated support systems. Mines, gas attacks, Tesla towers, automated autocannons, Gatling guns and mortars, which don't need to see to devastate. Do you know that Grunts were originally described as a little more intelligent than barking dogs? Read the Halo Fall of Reach novel to see how an entire battlefield got duped into walking to their own deaths. Even if the Helldivers were outnumbered, and I don't think that's the case, you'd be seeing this happen over and over again.
They typically come with a plasma pistol or a needler, which poses extra threat to an unshielded Helldiver, but certain Grunts can be seen operating vehicles or using powerful fuel rod guns, similar to automaton foot soldiers. They also come armed with sticky plasma grenades, which they are notorious for throwing at any opportunity. They're easily startled, fleeing when ambushed or when their leader is killed, or they just try even harder to blow you up.
Covenant weapons are not only shown visually to be snail-like in speed, which I would happily throw out normally, but are backed up in external sources to be quite slow, unless we go for better weaponry like snipers and carbines.
Alongside Grunts come the Jackals. They carry energy shields that make them harder to hit from the front, but they're vulnerable to precise shooting or explosives. Occasionally, Jackals ditch their shield to serve as snipers, something that Helldivers typically don't fight.
Alright guys, there's a factory strider coming after us.
Where at?
Oh shit, really?
Oh!
Oh wow. Wait, I never even...
Anthony, watch out. That little cannon is gonna one-shot you.
Shit!
And considering that those snipers can kill a Spartan in just a few hits, they would have a field day with Helldivers. Better get that shield pack. Next are the elites, which are really the backbone of the Covenant infantry. They carry plasma weapons stronger than those used by Grunts or Jackals, as well as plasma grenades and energy shields built into their armor. Additionally, there are many specialized types of elites, using jump packs, cloaking devices, armor lock that makes them impervious to damage. You get the idea.
Here are countless examples of elites being killed by 7.62 NATO rounds.
These guys just don't know when to quit.
What's the status? Over!
We've been engaged! Bad guy coming out! Ah!
I know this will upset countless people, but this is something baked into Halo from the very start. In the novels, in the games, in the guidebooks, in the official Bungie forums, in the Prima guides, with stated speeds, and therefore quantifiable kinetic energy. You can by all means not like it, but it is consistent across all UNSC weapons that have a stated value to them. They're not that fast, and if they're not fast, they're not that powerful. I'm not even going to disregard power scaling arguments that despite having slow speeds, by some miracle, UNSC weapons, despite no in-universe statement or acknowledgement to the case, seem to be more powerful than they would be in real life, in some examples. I would just be interested as to how powerful you think that number is. And if you are aware, I can say the exact same thing in favour of Helldivers. They shoot metal men to death with carbines. I received a significant amount of flack in my ODST versus the Clone Wars video for basically saying this. My argument for not using it then was because if I applied the same logic in favour of Star Wars weapons, we would quickly run into some problems if you expect firearms to hold up against blasters, when blasters can put down some of the worst Sith in history. The kind that kill planets, who eat people for breakfast, that can do things like this.
The highest ranking elites also carry an energy sword, which they can use to devastating effect in close combat.
What do you think's gonna happen to this bug? A, it's gonna die. B, I miss. Or C, where I neutralize a target through hyper-accelerated vaporization, leaving only atomized biological residue behind. It's C. I could watch that like 50 more times.
They're skilled at dodging grenades and incoming fire, and they'd definitely be smart enough to try and avoid any offensive stratagems. They would also react to how the Helldivers fought, getting closer if they tried using explosives or stratagems, flanking if they get pinned down by the rest of their squad, retreating if the fight isn't going their way. They most often serve as squad leaders for the Covenant, leading grunts and jackals into battle. Despite all their strengths, they would be vulnerable to energy weapons, since all it takes to kill them is a headshot when their shields are down. Now let's look at our space gorillas. Brutes serve a similar role as elites, and in Halo lore eventually replaced them altogether within the Covenant due to internal conflict. They're more aggressive and reckless than elites, with weaponry to match. Spikers firing super hot metal shards, a belt-fed grenade launcher, both of which have huge blades on them. Brutes typically don't come equipped with energy shields, but have durable armor to match, and sometimes come with deployable shields, EMPs, and other equipment. When their armor is broken, they have a chance of going into a berserk state.
Brutes are a fractional percent of the Covenant's full force. Barely relevant, really. If we are using start of Human Covenant War era brutes, only 30 years ago were the brutes stuck on the irradiated hell they call a homeworld. They have around 12 billion on Doisac, but that's the most we can really say for them. Most of those people are not going to be warriors, though I imagine they probably wouldn't need much convincing. Do you know that the brutes and elites by the time of Halo Reach refuse to fight alongside each other?
Dropping their weapon and charging into melee. The highest ranking brutes carry gravity hammers, and with the current state of ragdolling in the game, they would send Helldivers into orbit. In case you aren't sick of bugs yet, let's look at a less common enemy. Drones are agile flyers that come in huge swarms wielding plasma pistols. For reference, imagine giving Shriekers laser guns and doubling their numbers, and you have the idea. In wide open areas, they could terrorize Helldivers.
Damn, here they come. All right, I'm impressed. We can't go back. We have to keep pushing through. Good shooting, Trooper. Keep it up. We're almost there. Follow me. I see a way across.
Requesting sentry!
God. I'm just... Fucking worked, man.
But they'd likely come with nests that could be destroyed to stop them from appearing. The real heavy hitters of the Covenant infantry are the Hunters, which serve as armored shock troops, coming with armor plating, a plasma cannon on one arm, and a huge shield on the other. They also come in bonded pairs, so if one hunter goes down, the other flies into a rage, making them even harder to kill. While they're much less common than the other infantry types, they're only vulnerable to explosives or precision shots to the gaps in their armor, which only makes them that much more formidable.
When it comes to the Covenant military, Hunters are, frankly,
The goat! The goat!
but they have a few issues. The first is this: they're too exposed. Snipe them at long range, hit them with anti-tank rounds, or use biochemical warfare to melt them via their exposed joints. Even on the hardest difficulty in Halo 1, you can kill Hunters in one shot with the Magnum. And not only are they a delicate creature under all that armor, kill a few worms, and the whole thing comes undone.
The final Covenant species plays more of a support role. Engineers are a race that look familiar. They're incredibly intelligent and have an obsession with technology, and they can understand pretty much any device by looking at it for just a few seconds.
They're also incredibly likely to desert if the Covenant starts strapping bombs to them like they did in ODST, giving the Helldivers access to their technology.
They're completely unbothered by combat and barely distinguish between ally and enemy. So pretty much all they do is manufacture and repair the Covenant's vehicles. Occasionally, you'll see them equipped with devices that provide energy shields to any nearby Covenant units, and they're almost always rigged with explosives to keep them from being captured. Now, if there's one thing the Covenant loves more than its infantry, it's their vehicles, and I guarantee you will see so many during a ground invasion. Starting off with the Ghost, a hovering scout vehicle that comes equipped with rapid-fire twin plasma cannons. They are both quick and agile, and fare well in any terrain due to their ability to hover. There's also the Revenant, which serves a similar role as the Ghost with a small plasma mortar and a passenger seat. They're usually piloted by grunts, but can also be used by brutes and elites. Light maneuverable vehicles are something Helldivers don't usually fight, but their drivers are exposed to damage and explosives make quick work of both as well. Next is the Wraith. It serves as the main battle tank for the Covenant. It comes armed with a large plasma mortar and a turreted gunner seat. At longer ranges, it lobs surprisingly accurate indirect fire with its mortar, and in close combat it often tries to ram infantry and even other vehicles. The Wraith's Achilles heel is that its power source is exposed from behind, which can be damaged by pretty much everything.
Calling down a support weapon. Right on target.
Requesting air support.
Looking to the skies, we have Banshees. They provide ground support to Covenant troops, coming equipped with the same plasma guns as the Ghost, as well as an additional explosive plasma cannon. Most support weapons would make quick work of Banshees due to their light armor, but they can prove deadly if they catch you out in the open. In addition to Banshees, we have the Covenant's dropships, the Phantom and the Spirit. They both quickly deploy troops much like automaton dropships and come armed with concussive plasma cannons. The Phantom also features a small turret on either side, and along with its troops often drops ghosts or wraiths into battle. Finally, we have the Scarab. It looks like a mechanized Bile Titan, with a powerful beam weapon on the front and a large plasma cannon on top. Only the heavier offensive stratagems or precise shots to its core could bring it down.
He isn't wrong about the effectiveness of Covenant vehicles. It doesn't matter for a few reasons. The problem is we don't really know the extent of Helldivers' mechanized warfare. Helldivers frequently take on a plethora of armoured vehicles while on foot and survive. Their ability to spawn countless anti-vehicle implements anywhere on a planet give them an adaptability the Covenant don't have. If the Covenant were fighting in Australia and the United Kingdom at the same time, for example, on opposite ends of a planet, a Helldiver Pelican or a fighter or a super destroyer can quite literally move from one to the other in less than 10 seconds, drop whatever ordnance is needed, and bug out before retaliation can even zero in on a target. It is, among many other factors, why the Covenant cannot meet the Helldivers on the ground. The stratagem spam, which is only limited in-game for gameplay purposes, would be genuinely apocalyptic. Why 16 mortars when there's 30,000 to 500,000 super destroyers dropping them at the same time? There is no 4-player limit here. Shield bubble on top of shield bubble, mech suit on top of mech suit, guard dogs, automated sentry guns. It's never ending. To that effect, you can have entire regions of a planet locked down because a super destroyer fleet drive-by decide to drop mortar pods with no Helldivers, which massacre any incoming Covenant patrols, who eventually make it through the barrage to discover there's no one here and the stratagems just ran out of ammo. How can the Covenant hope to fight an enemy like that, who can layer upon layer shields, auto turrets, remote control guard dogs and mech suits? We aren't even thinking about the Seaf. While hell bombs fall and super destroyers FTL in for close air support, your Scarabs get an Atlas cannon, or the area gets napalmed. What do you think trillions of grunts are going to do when the napalm hits their fart tanks on their backs? When every single Helldiver can take an autocannon round to the skull with shields, or a rocket. Here is why, ultimately, I think Helldivers beat the Covenant, and why I don't think it's close. The Covenant have a few advantages over Super Earth. Covenant territory is around 10 to 20,000 light years in a straight line. Super Earth, according to my flawed but ultimately minimal estimates on the galactic map, is around 450 light years from end to end. Super Earth will be a lesser portion of that space because territory changes hands so often. Still, it's somewhat bigger than the UNSC in terms of territory, but it's also a lot younger. And this is seemingly reflected in the fact that we don't really know the size of Super Earth's territory. We know of around 250 named worlds, but even if they were all under the rule of Super Earth, that would be less than half of the UNSC's planet count. That being said, it took the Covenant 27 years to find Earth inside a 100 light year bubble. Even when the Kigyar were only 40 or 50 light years from them, I think time will be on the Helldivers' side. Originally, we were led to believe that Super Earth ships can be anywhere in the galaxy at any time, but that no longer seems to be the case. Things called FTL lines need to be established and can seemingly be destroyed between systems. meaning that the Helldivers, if they want to invade Covenant territory, they at the very least need to work for it first. And the beauty of their FTL drives is that they are more or less instant within their own sphere, meaning that if the Covenant are spread thinly across Helldiver space, the Helldivers can defeat them in detail by mustering their full force on the most pressing or weakest fleets, and can almost instantly bug out if they need to. By virtue of the UNSC's small size, Covenant couldn't have been fighting many simultaneous fronts. An overinflated assumption would be less than 30 battles in a year. Meanwhile, the Helldivers are fighting on 35 planets every day at this very moment. It begs the question, could they ever actually take High Charity? If High Charity decided to maintain itself in motion without using captured or copied Covenant FTL drives, I'm not certain.
Overall, I think a Covenant invasion of Super Earth would actually be surprisingly difficult for both sides.
For all the talk of Hellbomb this, 2000 gigaton that, I've never seen a single YouTuber mention the single deadliest weapon the Helldivers have in their arsenal. It's not Hellbombs or gigaton missiles, it's not mechs or fighters or pelicans or autoguns, guard dogs, shield generators, or the unstoppable tide of human wave tactics backed by technology. It's this. It's the ship itself.
To the left. No, your left. Take me up higher. What's happening?
Oh, it's horrible. They're torturing him.
What are we gonna do, Buzz?
Use your head.
But I don't want to use my head!
When you play Helldivers and operate in orbit of a planet, you move from A to B in real time between missions. The distance you travel is stated. The time it takes can be measured. Helldiver ships, given the right setup, are relativistic kill vehicles by the hundreds of thousands. Here's an example.
Hellpods primed. Engaging orbital thrusters.
I only regret that I have but one ship's worth of lives to give to our cause. The lives of humanity's present.
Just shy of 14,000 kilometers crossed in under 20 seconds. Around 9,000 Gs of acceleration every second, but that isn't the full story, because whenever you send your ship anywhere, you hear this noise, which comes with a secondary acceleration.
Engaging orbital thrusters.
I only regret that I have but one ship's worth of lives to give to our cause.
In this example, that first stretch of acceleration had the Super Destroyer accelerating at over 4,000 Earth gravities. The second leg, 16,000 Gs of acceleration. What this means is that when the Super Destroyer is moving, in a curve, and not a straight line mind you, it's going from 0 to Mach 6,100 in less than half a minute. Its inertial compensators, therefore, have to be powerful enough to counter that acceleration so every single person aboard isn't turned into jelly. More impressive still is the fact that it puts the brakes on far faster than it speeds up, meaning whatever kinetic energy it possesses is nullified by reversing thrusters, and it doesn't rip the ship apart. On that subject of kinetic energy, what might it be? If instead of using 2,000 gigatons to level a moon's surface, what if we instead take a leaf out of the Yang Wen-Li doctrine and smash into a planet directly? How powerful would that be? We need to know the mass of these destroyers to work it out. Problem is, we don't. We have two ways we can estimate the size. The first is by using the Democracy Space Station. We know it's an order of magnitudes more massive than a super destroyer, but we don't know how much that is either. But what we do know is it took 200 million salvage automatons not to build it, but to finish it off with recovered scrap. Assuming an automaton literally composed of metal is equivalent to a flesh and blood adult male of 80 kilograms, means that the total mass of these automatons is 16 million tons. Say half of that is wasted by Helldivers and their hell-bombing ways, 8 million tons. The Democracy Space Station is equivalent to 10 super destroyers, which means the destroyer is 800,000 tons. The other method is we can just use the mass of a ship of comparable but lesser dimensions to the super destroyer in real life, the Arleigh Burke Naval Destroyer. It masses just shy of 10,000 tons. I reckon a super destroyer probably vastly exceeds this, but it doesn't matter, as I will demonstrate. The super destroyer accelerated for 17 seconds in this example. It generated and nullified around 5 gigatons worth of kinetic energy right here on screen. 10 gigatons total because it had to slow down. But let's say it doesn't. Let's say it actually keeps going.
Fuck your dad, John!
Driving down the street with your head stuck in my window. What do you think I'm doing, you peen arse?
Slow down, John.
You using dog shit for toothpaste, mallet?
Slow down, John. Slow down, John.
I don't think I'll slow down. I think I'll speed up.
At maximum acceleration, the Helldiver ship quickly becomes deadlier than the sum of all of its weapons. In 30 seconds, it's hitting a world at more than 1% the speed of light, with over 12 gigatons of force. With a minute of constant acceleration, it doubles that speed with almost 4 times the power. If it can burn constantly for 15 minutes, we hit a planet or a ship at a third of the speed of light, and at more than 10 teratons of force. If we can last and fuel a full half hour of thrust, we have become a force akin to that which killed the dinosaurs. That's one single super destroyer, easily made, easily sacrificed. They lose these things all the time. That's the true power of Super Earth. Against potentially superior conventional ships of war like the Covenant, expect to see this sight happen in space often.
Not without help.
Commander, you don't have the firepower.
I've got the math.
Silent cop. Hit him hard, boss.
You're on your own, Noble. Carter out.
They only need half a minute of thrust to hit Covenant ships with comparable force to the UNSC Supermax at Reach. The Covenant lose completely and utterly because Super Earth can afford to play dodgems with Covenant ships at 10 to 1 odds, or even with inflated numbers at 5 to 1 odds, and they can still have ships to spare. We don't even know how many ships Super Earth actually has lost in the war, just that their best concentration they had was around 500,000 at the same time. Say goodbye to your shieldless worlds, Covenant, because Super Earth does not need to play ground-based warfare with you. It can, and it will hurt, but it could just as easily send one ship as a near light-speed projectile to your worlds and watch them crack. And that's why the Helldivers win. This is how the Covenant die, with thunderous banzai. I'll let Installation 00 calculate this feat of the UNSC Infinity ramming a battlecruiser larger than the Covenant's most common ship.
The Cubbies. They believe this is the home of one of their gods. The way I see it, if those freaks want to meet God, it's our duty to help them along.
The combination of armor and shields is strong enough to withstand direct impacts with a Covenant RCS-class armoured cruiser while sustaining negligible damage. A quick calculation reveals some extremely impressive specs in that regard. The Infinity has a mass of 907 million metric tons, meaning when it rammed the RCS, which although it was moving perpendicular to the Infinity, their approach velocity was similar to the Infinity striking a near stationary object. The Infinity exited slipspace and moved her entire length out of the rift before striking the RCS in approximately 4 seconds. This means her velocity at this point was approximately 1,423.5 meters per second. Putting her mass and velocity through a kinetic energy calculator gives us an impact force of 9,189,507.4 gigajoules, or nearly the same amount of energy as a 2.2 megaton explosion or 146 Hiroshima bombs detonating at the same time. The fact that the Infinity's shields were still up after that impact says volumes to the energy shield's strength. On top of this, since the Infinity outweighs the RCS approximately 10 times over, it highlights exactly why she could plough through the RCS without so much as a shudder.
2 megatons. 1,000 times weaker than the arsenal a Helldiver ship would carry normally. These calculations are a lot worse if we assume a larger mass for Helldiver ships. In 1 single second of accelerating here, the Helldiver ship exceeds the UNSC Infinity's kinetic energy in this scene. Don't get me wrong, I am sure that there may be ways to extrapolate Covenant ships as being much stronger on average than this feat in question, or than the Nyland books suggest, but I am not aware of what those feats are. There is no reason, for example, why the Covenant cannot play tit for tat against this doctrine themselves, but it comes down to one simple thing: numbers. Helldivers have so much more, and when the Helldivers need only destroy the 1,000 or 2,000 Covenant worlds with a fraction of their navy, there won't be any reinforcements coming to save the Covenant. The only hope the Covenant have is that they can play defensively and are able to build up enough of a force via industry to squash the Helldivers before they get their logistics set up. Because once Helldivers have FTL lines set up, all ships can be exactly where they're needed and flee just as quickly, meaning that the Helldivers can play guerrilla tactics on the interstellar scale that would make the best and brightest in the Covenant Navy weep. Considering the Covenant's industry needed Forerunner Gibbs to challenge the UNSC and their 2,000 odd ships, I don't think it's likely.
Blasphemy!
Thanks for watching.